Well, good afternoon. Here we are again with another of our presentations to discuss and showcase exactly what's going to happen at WWETT 2020. If you've never been to the Water and Wastewater Equipment Treatment and Transport Show, but you do remember going to the International Expo or the Pumper Show as it was known in years gone by, it's really expanded and in leaps and bounds since it moved to Indianapolis here a few years ago. This is going to be the first year that they have featured a municipal track specifically detailing the smart water, smart wastewater trends. And I know there's some confusion about what this actually is and what we're actually going to cover. Now, in the top right of your screen there, you'll see me. I'm Dendra Best. I'm the Executive Director of Wastewater Education. I'm the one that you usually contact when you're taking your classes or signing up for these events. But underneath there's somebody that you may not have seen before. This is Oliver Grievson. Hi, Oliver.
Yeah. Good evening, Dendra.
Oliver is
as I'm over here in the UK.
Yeah, a long and illustrious career and a member of many professional associations in the water sector in the UK and Europe. He's also our board chair. Oliver is going to be hosting and managing an expert panel and a track at WWETT 2020. And when we get going, Oliver's going to share a explanation about who's going to be on the panel and what the track is going to cover. I am going to pause my video just to conserve some of the bandwidth. We want to show you a little promo that we ran here just a couple of weeks ago. So bear with us. If you would pause your video, Oliver.
I certainly will. So when you see the term smart water bandied about at every turn, are you wondering, how does this apply to me? It applies in your wallet,
okay, here we go again.
Your business, your employer, and your community. During the next few months, we'll be giving you a taste of what you can expect to learn at WWETT 2020 from our Smart Water Track, a future vision for smart water. If all politics is local, then certainly all water is, be it drinking water, stormwater, or even wastewater. Being smart about our stewardship of what is so obviously a limited supply, we rely on learning from the best in our profession. That's exactly what we here at Wastewater Education plan to make happen.
The industry and profession has surpassed what any of us could ever imagined way back in 1979 when Pumper was delivered to mailboxes across a few Midwestern states. The Pumper and Cleaner Environmental Expo International was changed to the WWETT Show, the Water and Wastewater Equipment, Treatment, and Transport Show in 2015. We think it's a little better snapshot of what we have become and where we're headed. It's a show now for an entire industry of hardworking people who maintain water infrastructure, properly treat and recycle wastewater, keep recreational water safe, and our environment healthy on a national and international scale. Every year attendance grows, and so does the number of different countries who come to see and hear about what's new in the world of water. Where will the show be in another 40 years? I guess you'll just have to keep attending and find out.
And just a note for people when you are watching this recording, or if you are logging into the room to watch the recording, any of these windows can be made full screen by just hovering your cursor over the top right corner of any of these windows. You'll see a little symbol, which is the full screen toggle switch. And now at this point, Oliver, let's move over to your presentation and take it away.
Thank you very much, Dendra. As you heard from the video, in WWETT 2020 in Indianapolis, I'm going to be joined by John Cook, Live Riga, and Ben Keel, and we're going to discuss the concepts of what smart water actually is. And if I start to take you through my presentation, if I make that a little bit bigger, Dendra, if I can.
Sure, let's move it up and
make that full
come
screen.
back to the panel here in a little bit. There we go. There you go.
Make that a bit of a full screen.
And start the video.
Just to introduce who I am.
Yeah.
My name's Oliver Grievson, as Dendra said. I'm the chair of wastewater education. Also technical lead at an instrumentation EC&I company here in the UK called ZTech Control Systems. I'm the executive director of a LinkedIn group, Water Industry Process Automation and Control, where we discuss the whole concept of smart water, and the deputy chairman of the Sensors for Water Industry Group, another group that talks about instrumentation as a whole in the industry. Now, smart water has been a term that's probably been kicking around for about 8 to 10 years now. WIPAC and the SWAN Forum, the Smart Water Networks Forum, have been talking about it, and I think the term's changed over the years. Some people have called it smart water. Coming out of Germany, we've had the term Water 4.0, and more recently, probably in the past 6 months to a year, digital transformation. They're very neat buzzwords, and they're marketing words, and really, at the end of the day, it's a way of getting a concept into the industry to decide what exactly we are going to be talking about. A lot of you over the past few years may have heard all of these buzzwords: the Internet of Things, data analytics, big data, smart water networks, smart wastewater networks, artificial neural networks, data mining, more recently digital twins, all fitting into the larger concept smart cities. Some of these great things, some of these at the end of the day, they're methods of getting smart water, getting things into it, getting things ready, getting people prepared for a smart water revolution. No one's actually said at this point what it actually is, what it leads to, what are the benefits of it. And here are some of the benefits that people have talked about probably over the past year: improved efficiency, improved customer service, improved visibility, improved operation, and a lessening of the environmental impact. Okay, those are the benefits, but actually, if you've noticed, I still haven't answered what smart water actually is. And essentially, it's all about insight. It's all about knowing what's going on. Across the world, we have water and wastewater systems. They cover countries. No matter how many people you have, you can't cover all areas all the time. So you need some sort of operational awareness of what's going on. How do we do this? We have insight. Where do we get insight from? We get insight from information. We get information, how do we turn? From data. Now, if I take data, the UK water industry, and in fact the global water industry, has been famous for being data-rich, information poor. Why? Well, the UK water industry, I've certainly estimated in the past, collects about 300 million pieces of data every day. If you put smart water meters recording every hour to every our household in the UK, and there's roughly 24 million households, you'd gather a further 600 million pieces of data a day. So how on earth does an industry really cope with the best part of 1 billion pieces of data every day? Data is not the key, it's what you do with that data which is the key. So it's all about data. Where do we get data from? From the sensors on the ground, be it the dumb water meter that supplies your house, be it a smart water meter produced by a load of different manufacturers that's being installed, be it through the operational instruments or alarms. These all get collated together into data, which turns into information, which turns into insight, which again in turn turns into operational awareness. But you can say, is smart water all about technology? Is it all about sensors? Is it all about widgets in the ground measuring stuff? Well, it's not. It's about the people. It's about the processes. Yes, it's about the technology and how we use them. Okay, that's given us kind of what is smart water. Well, smart water is using the data that's collected within the industry to do things, to find out information, to find out what's going on. But what does this practically mean for a water company? What's it practically mean for a customer? It's all about the application, and probably one of the most famous applications, one of the most well-developed applications for smart water within the industry, within water meters, is the smart water meter, and that's all about leakage. We all see on the news these great things of geysers of water leaking out, burst pipes, and we all see in the press that leakage is up at 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, 50%, depending what country you live in. We all see per capita consumption, where, depending where you are in the world, the per capita consumption goes anywhere from about 80 litres per head per day in the developed world to 500 or 600 litres per head per day. Well, what's that all about? It's about water resources. It's about abstracting water, treating water, getting water to your taps as customers. But what's the environmental impact of that? What's the environmental impact of treating water? Yes, there's water leakage. Of course there is. Any modern main, even if you've got the most secure main, is going to leak. But it's managing that system. In the past, with water leakage, we've all seen the various listening sticks. People putting a stick to the ground and listening to the leaks in the pipe. Well, things have got a lot more intelligent. You've got hydrophones on plastic pipes. You've got pressure monitors. You've got water monitors. There's so much. You've got flow monitors. There's so much data. How do the water companies use that data to find leaks? At the end of the day, you can look at case studies, and yes, systems are put in place. You put district management areas for water leaks. You look at rate of change algorithms. All of it's based upon the information. Some of the more modern techniques around limiting per capita consumption. There's a great example of a company using behavioural science. And Anglian Water here in the UK have used that company, have trialled it, and they've used behavioural science to influence the customer to reduce the amount of water that the customer uses by about 8%. And it doesn't sound much, but in the UK, where one of our major influencers, Sir James Bevan, has said that the country is approaching the jaws of death, that we are going to run out of water, using multiple techniques So using smart waters, using intelligence within the network, and applying that to the water distribution system is helping the country as a whole move away from the jaws of death. And that's one of the applications. If you go to the wastewater, which is more of the focus of what we'll be talking about in Indianapolis, there's intelligent systems, there's monitoring systems, there's control systems that we can use. You'll see the example there. And roughly, putting some sort of real-time control system in, this one's by Hack Lang, the reduction in air and hence power is roughly around the 20% mark. Well, 20% off the electricity bill of a water company is a lot of money. So yes, there are benefits. There are benefits in supporting the customer. There are benefits in making it cheaper to treat water. And again, that comes round to cheaper bills or a better environment. But to go back, how did we do this traditionally? Nothing's new. Instrumentation's been in the water industry since the 1970s. All we're doing is getting better at using the instrument more efficiently. We've got hundreds of millions of pieces of data every single day, as I said, potentially up to 900 million. There's been so much that a lot of the analysis on that data is retrospective. We'll look at it after the event because it's too much information. Those systems can cost millions of pounds and take years. And generally, certainly on the telemetry front, there's a niche of people who understand it. But it's complex. It really is complex. So, how do we do it? How does smart water help us to do it? Let's have a look at some of the concepts. Data, as we know, comes from instrumentation. Instrumentation, we've got to look after. We've got thousands of sensors out there. But we need to look at how we get that instrumentation right. And how we do it, it's a process. And basically, going back to the basics of the water industry, we've got to look at the instrumentation life cycle. And that's starting from why are we installing the instrument, what data, what information are we going to get from it, what's the application, where are we going to put it, are we going to put it in a water main, or are we going to put it in a wastewater plant? Two very different applications. What are we going to use it for? How do we install it? How do we operate it? And at the end of its life, how do we replace it? And by looking at the life cycle of data, looking at the life cycle of the instrument and the data, we can get a quality data from the instrumentation. But come back, why are we using data? Is it regulatory? Do we have to because the law says we have to? Is it for operation control? Is it for efficiency, to save power, to save resources? Is it to support the customer? Or is it for operational awareness to see what's going on? All that data and all that information, you've got to identify where you can do it. You've got to assign a value to that data. Because if we assign a value, then everyone values the data, everyone values the information, and we look after the sources. It's no coincidence back in the 50s that the US coined the term garbage in, garbage out. Because if we get the fundamentals wrong, we might as well forget the whole smart water industry. Once that data requirement is known, once we know its application, then we look at it and go, how do we install it? Where do we install it? How do we operate and maintain it? And the key to doing that is looking at the value of that data, identifying the right instrument, putting it in the right place, putting it in there in the right way. And when you get it right, there's amazing amount that you can get from good quality data. This is a graph of a wastewater treatment works. It's a relatively small one. And this is looking over a 4-year period. Actually, something in the industry, it's termed eye over eye in the US. In the UK, we term it as infiltration. Incredibly difficult to look at on a wastewater network. Here you see a classical profile of infiltration into a network. You can't see it. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is smart water at its purest. It's looking at the data and going, right, where are things? What can I get from that data? In this, I can tell you, this is a wastewater collection network, and I can see a break in a pipe over years, depending on weather, getting worse and worse and worse. If I use a bit more information, if I look into commonly available information, I can tell you that actually, yes, the pipe's getting worse, but B, it was because of rainfall. By the nature of the flow and looking at the underlying geology in something that was freely available, I can actually tell you where the infiltration is within the pipe. And that's without digging it up at all. That's just looking at the data. And in this particular case, I turned round to the people at the time and said, the crack is in the pipe between halfway up the top half of the pipe. We found the pipe that was cracked, and actually it was in exactly that place. Now, this is smart water industry at its purest. Is it complicated to do that? Well, actually, it was just one flow meter. I've had a lot of questions well, how do we get smart water? We're a utility that doesn't have a lot of money. We're not going to invest in all these complicated systems. You don't have to. If you've got a flow meter on a wastewater collection system, you can use the principles of smart water straight off. Doesn't take much to do. But the data has to be right. And that takes a process. Looking at examples on the screen in front of you, do you think you're going to get that good quality data from those installations? That's what's on the ground. Is it growth within a V-notch? Is it a flume that's backwards? Is it an electromagnetic flow meter located next to a control valve which is going to interrupt it? Or is it an electromagnetic flow meter that's been so badly fouled that it's going to be massively overreading? In all these situations, the data quality is going to be terrible. And if the data quality is terrible, then don't go any further. Back to the 1950s, garbage in, garbage out. Back to that point, to collect that data, that's all I needed. That was a single 4-inch, 100mm electromagnetic flow meter that was properly installed, properly maintained. That, at its heart, is all you need for the smart water industry. Yes, there's times when you're going to have bigger systems. Here's another case study. A simple flume environment. Bit of a mix there. There's a flume and a rectangular notch weir, but correctly operating systems. And if you look on the graph on the right-hand side, what do you see? This is total daily volume flow data. It's a pollution event. Wastewater disappearing. Now, that's looking at that data. All you need is a flow measurement system to collect it and to look at the data and have time to look at the data and interpret that data. Do you need some clever machine learning or artificial intelligence or some terribly complex system? At its heart, no, of course you don't. Can those systems help? Absolutely. So the real-time control system that I mentioned earlier that was having a 20% energy saving, yes, that uses ASM1, Activated Sludge Model 1, and yes, it predicts, yes, it controls the system. Yes, that's more complicated, but yes, it's saving more money. Here's another case study about using data, using the information. And this is a case study that I've shamelessly pinched from Yorkshire Water. I was presenting quite a few years ago. And Yorkshire Water had the problem that they weren't meeting their targets. They were getting spills from the wastewater network, and it was a problem. And what they did was they changed the way they looked at their data. They changed the way they responded to blockages within the collection network and put some intelligence behind it. And the basic premise of what they did was they came up with the blockage timeline. And they looked at the way the sewer network behaved. So what they discovered was if there was a long dry period and a lot of debris built up within the sewer, depending upon the length, depended on how much debris built up, and then if there was a really heavy rainstorm, then all of that debris was washed down to the treatment works. If it was a really light rainstorm, there wasn't much of an impact. If it was just right, then again, that could cause a blockage. They looked at their risk points within the wastewater network, and with the right rainfall event, they knew where they had to target in terms of unblocking the sewer before it became a problem. Really worked. Absolutely. They defined the problem, they defined the application, they defined how they were going to use the data, and they did a fantastic job in actually reducing sewer blockages, reducing the impact on the environment. Was that smart water? Well, it was smart water before the term really was being coined. But yes, it was an intelligent way of turning data into information. That's more about that. That was simple. That was a simple thing. But there are cases where complexity is needed. And here is something, an example from a water company in the south of the UK. And they had huge rainstorms, 104-year rain event, closely two events followed by another. And what happened was the Navy shipyard in Portsmouth was actually flooded. That caused a massive problem, a load of inquiries, and it was decided, Southern Water decided to put a smart wastewater network solution in to allow an early warning if a problem was happening. It used Innovisor's ICM Live system. It used rainfall monitoring via smart rain gauges. It used weather radar. It used sewer level monitors and a lot of monitoring on pumping stations, with the absolute potential of going advance warning of a potential flood event. This was designed to protect everything within the region. It was relatively complex. The whole area around that part of the country is actually an island catchment within mainland UK. It all was designed, all went to a single pumping station, which was the size of most wastewater treatment works, which transferred flows to the right place. Some of it transferred flows to the wastewater treatment works, some of it transferred it to storm tanks. Once the storm subsided, back to the pumping station and on to the treatment works. All of this crossing the island. ICM Live and the Capital Delivery Alliance put this early warning system in. They used weather radar, they used rain gauges, they used a fast model to tell the operators who are permanently on that pumping station what they had to do. It created a pumping schedule which constantly updated, and if actions weren't taken, alarms would raise up and raise up and raise up until something was done. In this particular situation, a great example of how a smart wastewater network can be used. But what's next? Here you had a great application. This absolutely called for a smart wastewater network. And the complexity was there. But in general, the industry has struggled in the adoption of smart water, struggled in the adoption of Water 4.0, struggled in what we now call digital transformation, as the benefits aren't really known. The reason why in potable water distribution leakage is actually you can put a defined figure. If you lose a megalitre of water, you know what that megalitre of water costs. With water resources becoming an issue more and more at the minute, actually that megalitre is almost more valuable saved than supplied to the customer. A megalitre of water is roughly about $100. Actually, in terms of water resources, in terms of delaying reservoir construction, etc., 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 that megalitre is more valuable. But what are the first steps? We come back to the people, we come back to the processes, and yes, we come back to the technology. The first steps in adopting smart water, in adopting Water 4.0, is really defining what information you want. What's useful if you're the CEO of a company, if you're a director, if you're a manager, if you're an operator on the ground? What information is important? And that's not technology, that's people. That's knowing your internal stakeholders within the company and identifying what's needed. And that filters down the chain from information to data to sensors, what sensors we need to put into the ground. Some of it, yes, is skills utilization. Do we have the right skills within the water industry? We all know that the water industry is suffering, probably globally, I think it's fair to say, from a deterioration of the availability of skills. But what skills do we need? Do we need to develop more skills? Is there a gap analysis on the skills, and where do we need to develop them? Then from there, it is technological, it is process. Do we, if we've got the information, do we have the right data? Do we have the right information? Do we have the right sensors in place? Some of it may well be taking sensors out of service. Some of it may well be bringing new sensors in, new sources of data in. How do we use that data as well? I mentioned earlier using data for customer influencing, using it for psychological influencing to reduce per capita consumption. What can we do? We can only do that with a smart meter. We can't really do it properly with a dumb meter. Once we know what information we want, it's a case of putting the right technologies in place, putting the right systems in place, putting the right processes, and having everyone knowing, from education from people who work in the industry to education of customers as well. And here's a few more examples. Here's some examples of what we can do with it. This is a concept that was kicked off probably in Holland by Stoa about looking at water resource recovery facilities. At the time, which is about 10 years ago, the factory approach was just about coming in. Now, from a wastewater treatment works, we're producing power. There are some wastewater treatment works producing biodiesel. There are some wastewater treatment works, theoretically in the future, that can produce plastics. Microplastics are becoming a great issue. We, of course, need oil and petroleum to produce plastic, maybe in the future the wastewater factory is going to become a source of producing plastics. And that's being done. You only have to look at the work being done by Mark van Loosrecht in Holland. And they are doing this. But we've got to treat the wastewater treatment works as a factory. We've seen case studies in Denmark and more case studies around the world where power-hungry wastewater treatment works are becoming energy neutral. A subject coming up at the minute is carbon usage. The smart water industry is a way for the water industry to get towards zero carbon by maximising its efficiency. Here's another case study, zero pollutions. Pollution events in the UK is a massive thing. There's a lot of monitoring going in over the past 5 years in the UK. We've got event duration monitors. They've been put on combined storm overflows. That's part one. In the next asset management period, which is our investment period in the UK, we're putting more control on the front end of wastewater treatment works, more monitoring on the front end of wastewater treatment works, and creating a wastewater system. Why? To maximise the throughput of wastewater through the wastewater system and minimise the impact on the environment. Zero pollutions, you can ask, it's a lofty goal, but it's a goal that the water industry is heading towards. I've mentioned non-revenue water. Here are some figures. Non-revenue water in the UK is about 20% on average. You can see that in the US, 24%, South America, 38%, Asia, 50 and 51%. How do we get that down? On the right-hand side, you see an example from Australia. This was a case study produced by the Swan Forum about 6 or 7 years ago about a company in Australia. And they took a great deal of time to get that non-revenue water down. Was it all smart water? No. Was it all instrumentation, district management areas, and a progressive development of technology to find out where the leakage problems were happening? Well, yes, it was. And they got some great results. The graph on the bottom was the case study from Lisbon. The water company in Lisbon, PAL, over a number of years, they were roughly going at about 27-28% non-revenue water, 27-28% leakage. They then went down within about 5 or 6 years, down to 7 to 8%. The way they did this was to move from the case study of just replacing pipes by age to using data, using intelligence within the potable water distribution system to go, well, actually, let's target our pipe replacement in these places. The longer term case study, actually, that non-revenue water started creeping back up. So again, they looked at where the data was, what the data was saying, and they found the problems were in the trunk mains. And anyone who deals with water distribution will know how difficult it is dealing with trunk mains. And then they were taking a year or two to make those repairs. And again, the non-revenue water is now heading back down. It's using the data, it's using the intelligence within the data to make changes. And that, at its heart, is what the smart water digital transformation is within the water industry. But we are just starting the journey. Yes, smart water is a buzzword, and I think we've got to be proud that it's a buzzword. Yes, it's something that we're driving forward, using data and information more intelligently to get the best possible value, adding data points where it's needed, but again, taking them away where we don't. Instrumentation that's out there potentially being maintained has a cost to it. We should be taking that instrumentation away where we don't need it. But we've got to identify where it is. it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve the industry's woes. It's not going to actually, in some ways, do anything, but it will tell us where the problems are so we can apply our industry knowledge and skills where they're needed. We can target where the problems are. But it is all about the application. The advice I give to a lot of technology providers out there is application, application, application. And if you are a technology advisor, looking at your clients, it's a case of saying, where can I help my potential customer in their pain points? In the UK, yes, that's leakage. And yes, there are other areas. It's looking at where the pain point of the customer is and developing solutions around that. There's going to be a lot more than that at WWETT in Indianapolis. This has been a very, very short introduction of a very small amount of where the smart water industry can go. And in fact, at WWETT, I'm going to cover what I've just covered in quite a bit more detail, go into a lot more case studies, talk about more about the data and its application, and that's going to be session 1. Session 2, we're going to go into a lot more detail about the instrumentation life cycle, a lot more into the maintenance and verification and the difference between verification and calibration, converting data into insight and using data in a much more advanced way, touching on machine learning, touching on artificial intelligence. And John Cook and Live Riga are going to join me, and Ben, who's a fellow director at Wastewater Education, is going to join me in discussing those concepts. And it is going to be very much a discussion. And in the third session, it's going to be theory into practice. I'm going to talk about what can be done on the Smart Wastewater Network. Live Riga is actually going to run a model and take the audience through a model of an activated sludge system. And John Cook's going to go into machine learning algorithms. It's not all about artificial neural networks. And then we'll talk about the future of smart water. There's 2 sessions. There's 2 lots of sessions. First lot on the Tuesday. We're going to have a panel discussion on the Wednesday morning. And we're going to repeat Tuesday's lot on the Thursday for those who couldn't be there on the Tuesday. So I really do hope you're going to join us at WWETT. It's going to be a fascinating time. And it's going to be a fascinating discussion with everyone who's going to be there. So I look forward to seeing you in Indianapolis. And I hope you enjoyed this very quick taster of what we can do with the smart water industry.
Well, thank you. That was a good overview. And I think what we've really trying to grasp with this whole dual, remember the track is available on 2 days, and the panel discussion on the screen there are the participants, is we're talking about managing a very limited and a very finite resource. People who are attending this from municipalities of any size, not just the big municipalities, but the small communities who are looking for some information to maximize their operator skills and technologies. You're really looking at doing more with less. And this is relating to, though, the actual supply of water, the actual supply of power, generation of power, both for water and for wastewater facilities. But fundamentally, it's about money, which was why we called that the topic for today. Show me the money. This is all really interesting, but what does it boil down to? Well, as you've just heard, what it boils down to is a way for you to use technology, to use the example from other communities, not just here in the US and Canada, but worldwide. Use that experience and take what you learn, take it back to your small communities or your larger municipalities, and as you can see, the results can be quite surprising as far as the energy savings and the operational costs. And that really is the value of attending WWETT, and particularly next year in February, is that in one place you will have access to people from all over the world, from international experts from all of the continents who can tell you, you don't think this is going to work? Well, here's how it worked for us. Are we so very different that we can't take what we learn here and apply it for ourselves? And with that, Oliver, I would thank you so much for agreeing to do this little introduction for us. Do you have any closing comments?
I think I'm going to say I look forward to seeing everybody at WWETT in February. So
yes, me too.
Hope to see you there.
If you are watching this recording on YouTube, the resources that you'll see there on the left of the screen, I will put in as clickable links. If you're watching this through the Adobe Meeting Room, you can download the attendee brochure. That's listed there in the file share. Also, there are a couple of links there to more information about the WWETT Show. And if you're looking for a discount on the registration fee, that is the button list there that you can access via our organization. At this point, I am going to kind of put this into perspective of exactly what we're talking about here. And when the video ends, we will close the recording for the day. Oliver, if you would mute your microphone, that would be great.
Last week, scientists at NASA released this. The shot is compiled from data from NASA's VIIRS instrument, which orbits the Earth about every 100 minutes, taking measurements of light coming off the planet. That can be translated into ribbons of imagery like this, and then into one of these. And this is just the latest in NASA's Earth from Space album, which may be one of the most mind-expanding collections of images in human history, in my opinion. It began with a shot taken by the Apollo 8 crew in 1968. And NASA scientist Gene Feldman says it made a big impression on him.
I think it's called Earthrise. And I remember seeing that and the stark contrast between this gray, lifeless rock that we had spent all this time and effort getting to. And here was this beautiful little shining blue and white marble that held everything that we as humans know about history, art, culture, love. Everything was contained on this one little tiny dot in space. I was just so fascinated by the beauty of it and trying to understand, how did this happen? How does it work? Has kind of led me to do what I've done.
And for the last several decades, Feldman has done remote sensing.
Yeah, there's an old expression about sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
That is not a problem for a remote sensing scientist. Feldman studies the Earth from space. He says it's like taking vital signs of the planet, which means working with
scientific images that maybe show ocean color or sea surface temperature or land vegetation, or those are why we do what we do, to tell us about the planet from a clinical perspective. But the other images, the beautiful ones, they resonate with people because it's our home.
In 1972, we saw our home in a new way. Apollo 17 astronauts snapped this picture. Actually, they snapped a lot of pictures.
It crystallized so much about the environmental movement at the time. It gave people the first look at their home planet as a single entity.
In 1990, Carl Sagan made this Voyager image famous, his pale blue dot. Here he is on Science Friday talking about it.
I thought, that's us, a mote of dust in a sunbeam. And it spoke to me about the need for us to care for one another and also to preserve the pale blue dot, which is the only home we've ever known. And it underscored the tininess, the comparative insignificance of our world and ourselves.
Then in 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. And it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it.
With satellite data, like this map of chlorophyll and land vegetation over time, accuracy is key, obviously. But it's also most easily deciphered as imagery, Feldman says.
Because the data volumes that we get from space now are astronomical, the only way that we can really handle this anymore is to visualize it. And no matter what computers we may build, the human mind and the human eye, in my mind, is still the most powerful integrator of information.
The objective here is to create models that accurately reflect the past so that we can predict how the planet will change in the future, Feldman says.
Or if some of those changes might be negative to the way we want our Earth to be, what can we do about it?
Simon wants to make the world better too, starting with the atmosphere.
And I'm getting results that I like, but I think it's a little bit exaggerated. So I'm working on some techniques to try to tone it down a little bit.
To make it a little more homey. For Science Friday, I'm Flora Lichtman.